Tonight with why it's time to end Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and time to let all Americans serve their country with pride and honesty. Let's start with Rush Limbaugh's comments about Congressman Jim Clyburn. Joining me now are two of Clyburn's Democratic colleagues, Ohio Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur and California Congresswoman Barbara Lee. Thank you both for joining us. Let's listen to Rush Limbaugh, if you dare, of what he said yesterday.
The white racist leadership of the Democrat Party trying to ace out Clyburn. Clyburn started to demand respect, and all hell seems to break loose in the Democrat Party. Hey, I have a suggestion. You know, I like to mediate these things. I like to bring people together. I like to unify people. I don't like seeing this kind of strife. Clyburn's worried about not having the car. Clyburn's worried about not having the perk of a big office, driver, so forth. The way this can all be worked out, Clyburn's new position, driving Miss Nancy. He gets to keep the car. He gets to go everywhere she goes, parties and everything else. He's not in the back of the bus. He's in the driver's seat, and she's in the back of the car being chauffeured. Solved problem.
Let me start with Congresswoman Lee on this. You know, I wonder if people, well, I don't have to wonder anymore, they still think like this. And one of them's on the radio. His name's Rush Limbaugh. The imagery there, back of the bus, driving Miss Daisy, pretending that Jim Clyburn's Morgan Freeman, the whole number here. What do you make of it?
First, as my mother would say, consider the source. I don't believe this is the attitude of the majority of Americans. But clearly, we've come a long way in terms of racial healing, but we have a long way to go, and there's still people who believe as Mr. Limbaugh believes. But, you know, I don't think that's what's important. I think what's important is that we have to move forward, have a dialogue about race, and just really consider the source. Nothing's going to change Rush Limbaugh in what he says. He has to act responsibly. He hasn't. He should, but I don't think that he is, and so we have to move forward. I think what's important, Chris, is to look at this race and look at the background and qualifications of Mr. Clyburn, his experience. He comes to the leadership with a wealth of understanding of all of the issues that affect all Americans, north, south, east, west, urban, rural, and so that's one of the reasons that myself and the Congressional Black Caucus are supporting Mr. Clyburn.
I'm not going to let this opportunity pass despite the high-mindedness of your comments right there. Let's go right now and take a look at Rush Limbaugh's greatest hits or nastiest hits. This is not a new subject for him, and then we're going to get back to this leadership race here. Here's Rush Limbaugh over the years and what he's had to say, and let's listen so we can judge him and see the pattern.
We're witnessing racism all this week that led up to the inauguration. We are being told that we have to hope he succeeds, that we have to bend over, grab the ankles, bend over forward, backward, whichever, because his father was black, because this is the first black president. Obama is the greatest living example of a reverse racist, and now he's appointed one. You getting this, AP? Sonia Sotomayor to the U.S. Supreme Court. What they don't know is that in Obama's entire economic program is reparations. That's exactly the same thing you can say about Obama. He wouldn't have been voted president if he weren't black.
Congresswoman Kaptur, thank you for joining us as well. I want your view on this, and then we'll move on to the more high-minded subjects, but I'm going to let this pass. This guy's got an audience out there, and he has tasted a victory, perhaps, in being able to once again, look at, well, there he is. You're not missing this crazy performance here. This issue of this fight, since there is an African-American involved, and since there's a Caucasian-American, to use that term, involved, Steny Hoyer and Jim, he has seen an opportunity to once again see it all in terms of race. Is that the issue, or is it the issue of how the Democrats deal with the fact they lost an election, they've got to reassemble a leadership team, and somehow find the best possible way to represent themselves to the world?
Well, first of all, Chris, let me just say that if Mr. Clyburn has his hands on the steering wheel, I can guarantee you it's a firm grip, and that car is headed in the right direction. And I just wish that Mr. Limbaugh would use more of his power to make sure that American cars get into the Korean market and the Japanese market and the Chinese market and the European market so we can start creating more jobs in this country. I know Mr. Clyburn would drive the car in that direction.
Okay, well, let me go back to this question of the leadership fight. I want to find out about this. Congresswoman Capter, you have asked for a delay. You've circulated a petition. Now, what happened is the Democrats lost the speakership. That means Ms. Pelosi's lost the speakership. It means she goes down to the level she'd like to as Democratic minority leader of the minority, and that would mean that Steny Hoyer goes back to number 2, and that James Clyburn from South Carolina moves down to number 3 position. Now, the question is, it's not that neat, and you want to have a further examination of this before you vote. Is that right? You want more time on this to think about it.
Yes, Congressman Peter DeFazio of Oregon and I are circulating a letter asking members to sign on, and we're doing very well. We just started it 2 days ago, saying that we really need to assess what's happened, listen to our members as they return from all regions of the country. We don't need to have leadership elections immediately. They're all running for these different offices. The real question is, what can our party do now to help to move this country in a positive direction, to change the economic practices that have just been hemorrhaging jobs from coast to coast. The president's original advisors, I think, were ill-advised. He's gotten rid of a couple of them, thank goodness. And I think it's really incumbent upon the Democrats that remain to help correct the ship of state. This election was about the economy. Byron Dorgan's book, Take This Job and Ship It, I have constituents giving me this book, talking about what's happened to their jobs. I think it's the responsibility of the Democratic caucus to put forward an economic program and to do it as members of the House, not because somebody in the economic office at the White House wants something, but because we as the Congress stand up for the American people. That's what this election was about.
Congresswoman Lee, it seems to me there's a differential between the Yeah.
I was just going to say, if I might just mention, and I look forward to alliances with some of the Tea Party Republicans that have just been elected, because when NAFTA passed in 1993, we only had a 12-vote margin that would have made the difference. And look at the terrible hemorrhage of jobs that occurred because of that. I'll tell you, I think that there's a real Democratic Tea Party Republican alliance to be born in this new Congress. And if it doesn't happen, the people who don't support jobs in this country won't be reelected 2 years from now.
Well, let me go to Congresswoman Lee on that question. It seems to me there's a divide in the Democratic Party in the country between the coasts, the California coast, out west, Washington State, back east, New York, this sort of the, we might call them the port cities, the coasts. They're better off economically. They're doing well in the Democratic Party, by the way. The Democratic Party did great in New York State. They won all the Senate races for both Senate seats. They did great in Massachusetts again with Deval Patrick and all the members of the House getting reelected. You get in the middle of the country, starting in Pennsylvania and all the way across the Midwest, the industrial part of the country, the Democrats got wiped out. Marcy Kaptur just spoke for them. She is concerned that the Democratic Party, as currently put together, is not in a position to win the hearts and minds and keep the jobs and win the jobs for the people in the middle of the country. You're out there in Berkeley on the West Coast. Do you think you can speak for the people in the middle of the country? Isn't this a problem that Nancy Pelosi's from San Francisco? She doesn't understand the problems of the middle of the country. Is that a decent argument or not?
That's not a decent argument, Chris, because when you look at the unemployment rates in California, in New York, throughout the country, when you look at unemployment rates in communities of color, for example, in the African American and Latino community, double-digit, twice the unemployment rates of the national average. When you look at what is taking place throughout the country, the issue is jobs. The issue is economic recovery. We have unemployment rates out here, again, that are off the scale.
I want to thank you both for being here, Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur and Congresswoman Barbara Lee. Thank you both for, I think, this important discussion. Coming up, President Obama's